So think about this for a second. What happens when doing the right thing, the respectable thing that keeps your family comfortable and earns you all that admiration from your peers? What if that actually requires you to live inside a massive, all-consuming lie?
Right, which is, I mean, that's such a terrifying thought.
It really is, because we're totally conditioned to believe that morality and social standing, they just go hand in hand. Like, you pay your taxes, you show up to community fundraisers, you tell the truth, and society rewards you with a good reputation.
Yeah, that's the basic social contract right there.
Exactly. It's built on that exact assumption.
Yeah.
But today, in this deep dive, we're looking at Henrik Ibsen, and, well, he basically decided to dismantle that assumption piece by piece.
Oh, he completely destroyed it. And, when we look at the source material today, this really incredible Chesterton radio collection of classic Ibsen adaptations, we're actually hearing that destruction happen in real time.
Yeah, we're focusing on 3 specific plays, right?
Mm.
The Pillars of Society, An Enemy of the People, and A Doll's House.
Right. And through these broadcasts, Ibsen forces you to confront this highly uncomfortable reality, which is that respectability is, well, it's frequently just a heavily fortified costume.
Nice costume, yeah.
Exactly. It's designed by the community, tailored by economic anxiety, and people wear it just to obscure who they actually are underneath, which is often pretty ruthless.
And what's so fascinating about these sources is the medium itself. We're listening to mid-20th century radio broadcasts like Great Plays, Studio One, and the Lux Radio Theater. So we're experiencing 19th century Norwegian theater.
Right through this lens of American mass media.
Yeah, it's this wild time capsule. These radio programs were acting as ambassadors of classic literature. They took these plays that originally just, shocked the corsets off Victorian Europe and piped them directly into millions of living rooms.
Which just proves that the psychological warfare Ibsen was waging back in the 1870s hadn't lost a single ounce of its punch.
It really hadn't. So why does it work so flawlessly, even across time and a totally different medium?
Well, I think it's because Ibsen fundamentally changed the geography of dramatic conflict.
Yeah.
Like before Ibsen, the theater was mostly the domain of kings and queens, or these massive historical epics.
Or those super artificial melodramas where the villain literally twirls a mustache.
Yes, exactly. Where the hero always wins just by being perfectly virtuous. The stakes were always empires, or these sweeping, larger-than-life romances. But Ibsen looked at that and realized, oh, wait a minute. The most vicious battles aren't happening on battlefields.
Right.
They're happening in the middle-class parlor rooms, in these heavily upholstered, stifling, ordinary homes. He took grand tragedy and just dropped it right onto the Persian rug of the Victorian living room.
That's such a great way to put it. So let's look at the architect of this shift. To understand how he turned the living room into a battlefield, we really have to look at the man himself. The commentary from Barrett H. Clark in our sources gives some great background here.
Yeah, Ibsen definitely wasn't writing from some ivory tower of inherited wealth.
Not at all. He was born in 1828 in a small lumber town on the coast of Norway. And when he was just a kid, his father's business totally collapsed. It plunged the family into severe poverty.
And social disgrace, which is key. That sudden fall from grace, losing their respectability overnight, it left a permanent scar on him.
It really did. It gave him this incredibly cynical, just razor-sharp view of community loyalty.
Definitely. I mean, think about his teenage years. He gets sent away to an even smaller coastal town to work as an apprentice to an apothecary.
Just a poor, brooding kid mixing powders behind a counter.
Right. But think about what that means in a tiny town where everybody knows everybody. He's the ultimate fly on the wall.
Oh, totally. It's like a modern-day pharmacist in a small town. You see the massive gap between public persona and private reality.
Exactly. You see the mayor or the shipping magnate parading around town, projecting pure moral authority all day.
And then they're creeping into the apothecary at night to get remedies for ailments they would never, ever mention in daylight.
Right. That specific environment trained his eye. He saw the hypocritical delta between what the quote-unquote pillars of the community preached and what they actually did behind closed doors.
And he didn't just observe, he actually learned the mechanics of theater from the ground up, right? He managed a local theater in Bergen.
Yeah, he directed hundreds of plays, many of them those super commercial, contrived French, well-made plays. So he learned exactly how to build suspense, how to hold an audience hostage, and then he weaponized those mechanics to deliver these devastating social critiques.
But, okay, I have to challenge the conventional wisdom here for a second. If his main goal is just to expose social evils and basically scold the audience, why did anyone buy a ticket?
That's a very fair question.
Like, nobody wants to pay money to sit there for 2 hours and be told their whole life is a hypocritical sham. If these plays were just preachy sermons, wouldn't Victorian audiences have completely tuned them out?
Well, they actually tried to. Ibsen's critics accused him of exactly that. They'd watch something like The Pillars of Society, see the corruption exposed, and then immediately demand to know what his solution was.
They wanted the political remedy.
Exactly. But Ibsen's response was brilliantly defiant. He explicitly stated that his business was to ask questions, not to answer them.
Wow, that's a huge shift from the traditional moralist role. He refuses to hand out the grading rubric at the end.
Right, he's just the diagnostician. He runs the scan, hands you the paper showing the tumor, and walks out of the room.
Leaving you to deal with the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, because if he gives a neat moralistic solution, the play just becomes a sermon. And sermons have a very short shelf life. By refusing to answer, he elevated these local, tiny Norwegian scandals into universal interrogations of mankind.
Which brings us perfectly to our first play, The Pillars of Society, from 1877. We're looking at the Great Plays radio adaptation from 1942. And right away, it drops the listener into this masterclass on the tension between industrial progress and moral compromise.
And he anchors that entire war inside one character, Karsten Bernick.
Bernick is such a fascinating psychological study. He's the wealthiest businessman in town, the shipyard owner, the undisputed engine of the local economy.
He practically sweats respectability.
Totally. The play opens in his sunlit living room. His wife is hosting a sewing circle. The town square is bustling with the commerce he essentially controls. And all these women are just congratulating themselves on the purity of their quiet town, contrasting it with the rottenness of places like America.
Right, they're terrified of the encroaching modern world, the new railways, the steam-powered machines. They see all that as an existential threat to their sound moral basis.
And Bernick is supposedly the chief defender of that moral basis. But the dramatic irony here is just devastating because his entire empire, his wealth, his pristine public image is built on this colossal, festering lie.
The history is so messy. Basically, 15 years prior, Bernick was in two massive crises at once. He was caught having an illicit affair with a married actress, and at the exact same time, his mother's shipping business was on the brink of bankruptcy because of an embezzlement rumor.
Right, so he needs a scapegoat to survive.
And he finds one in his younger brother-in-law, Johan.
Johan was this adventurous guy, no family or fortune to protect. So through a bunch of manipulation, Johan agrees to let the public assume he was the one having the affair, and he flees to America.
But Bernick takes it a step further. While Johan is literally on a ship crossing the Atlantic, Bernick lets the town believe that Johan also stole the missing company funds.
He totally weaponizes Johan's absence. By letting the theft rumor spread, Bernick creates this super convenient cover story for his family's near ruin. The creditors back off out of sympathy.
And then he rebuilds the business, secures capital by marrying Johan's wealthy sister Betty, even though he really loved her stepsister Lona.
He sacrificed his friend's reputation, his own chance at true love, and the truth itself, just for economic survival.
But this is where Ibsen's genius for moral complexity really shines. Because Bernick isn't some cartoon villain who just enjoys suffering. When Lona finally comes back from America 15 years later and confronts him, his defense is deeply rooted in utilitarian calculus.
Yeah, he argues that the deception was a necessary evil.
Exactly. He says, look, the prosperity of hundreds of thousands of people depends on me. If the house of Bernick collapsed, the whole town would have been dragged into poverty.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second, because in a corporate context, that's a deeply compelling argument.
It is.
Bernick isn't just hoarding gold like a dragon. He's building schools, he's funding the water supply, he's installing gas lighting, he's pulling this town into the modern era. If telling the truth means the business fails, and that means hundreds of working-class families starve, doesn't moral pragmatism say you maintain the lie? Can't good intentions and economic stability justify a past deception?
And that is the exact trap Ibsen sets for you. He invites you to agree with Bernick. Bernick has turned prosperity into an idol, believing the ends justify the means. But then Ibsen forces you to watch the compounding moral cost of that philosophy.
Because a society built on a lie is inherently fragile.
Exactly. When Johan comes back and threatens the lie, Bernick has to protect it. And we see what a quote-unquote respectable pragmatist is capable of when cornered.
Which brings us to one of the most chilling metaphors in modern theater, the Indian girl.
Oh, this ship. So the Indian Girl is an American merchant ship sitting in Bernick's shipyard for repairs. At this exact moment, Bernick is quietly orchestrating this massive, dubious real estate scheme.
Right, he's secretly buying up all the worthless land along a proposed railway route. So when he announces the railway, he'll be wildly rich, but he needs absolute public trust to pull it off.
And if Johan exposes the 15-year-old forgery and affair, Bernick's enemies will crush the railway project instantly.
Johan is frustrated by the hypocrisy, so he issues an ultimatum. He's going back to America on the Indian girl to settle his affairs, but he demands Bernick publicly clear his name when he returns.
But here's the twist. Bernick's foreman, Krapp, has inspected the Indian girl and found that the hull is completely rotten. It's fundamentally unseaworthy. If it hits even a moderate storm, it will go down with all hands.
The owners just want to sink it for insurance money. And faced with losing his reputation and his railway scheme, Bernick makes this horrifying calculation.
He forces a desperate worker to clear the ship for sailing. He actively chooses to let an entire crew of innocent sailors and Johan drown in the freezing Atlantic just to keep his secrets safe.
It's the ultimate manifestation of his economic philosophy. The Indian girl looks shiny and perfectly functional on the surface, just like Bernick's society, but beneath the waterline, it's entirely compromised by rot.
And it's designed to look good right up until the moment it drags everyone to the bottom. It shows the terminal endpoint of valuing prosperity over morality.
The way the radio adaptation handles this is just brilliant. Because you don't have a lavish set, you just hear the howling wind of a massive storm blowing in. Bernick is sitting alone in the dark, listening to the weather, knowing the ship has sailed.
While the town is literally outside preparing to throw a parade for him, the psychological claustrophobia is intense.
And then the devastating twist. Bernick discovers his own young son, Olaf, ran away and stowed away on the Indian girl.
That's the moment the utilitarian calculus totally shatters. He can rationalize dead nameless sailors or even Johan as collateral damage, but his own flesh and blood, it breaks him.
Because the very lie he built to protect his son's inheritance is now literally threatening to drown the kid.
Now, thanks to his wife Betty, the ship is stopped in the harbor in time. But the ideological damage is done. Bernick stands in front of the town, looking at these banners, praising his morality, and he finally snaps.
He incinerates his own facade. He confesses to the affair, the theft, the secret land grab.
And Lona's watching this. Bernick tells her that women are the true pillars of society. But Lona corrects him with the core thesis of the play. She says, no, the spirit of truth and the spirit of freedom, they are the pillars of society.
Truth and freedom. Not wealth, not reputation. That is such a powerful pivot point because Bernick shows us what a community will do to protect a profitable lie. But the inverse is maybe even more disturbing. What happens when someone tries to force a community to face an unprofitable truth?
Which leads us directly to the 1950 Studio One broadcast of An Enemy of the People.
This play, if Pillars is about corporate corruption, Enemy of the People is about public health and governance. The modern parallels are frankly astonishing.
It's about a scientific fact being suppressed for municipal survival. The protagonist is Dr. Thomas Stockman, the medical officer for this massive new health resort in his hometown.
He actually proposed the resort originally, right? It's the economic lifeblood of the town.
Right, he's affluent, comfortable, totally civic-minded. But he notices tourists are getting typhoid and gastric illness. So, being a scientist, he secretly tests the water.
And the results confirm his absolute worst fears. The entire health resort is a toxic pest house. The water is contaminated by bacteria from the tanneries upstream.
And in this great stroke of dramatic irony, the worst polluting tannery is owned by his own father-in-law, Morton Kill.
The water is literal poison. Now, Stockman is a rationalist. He genuinely assumes that if he provides empirical data showing a problem, the authorities will thank him and fix it.
He's giddy. He thinks he's a hero. He is entirely blind to the political and economic blast radius of his discovery.
And his political foil is his brother, Peter Stockman, who happens to be the mayor and the chairman of the resort board.
Peter embodies institutional self-preservation. When Thomas shows him the data, Peter doesn't care about public health at all. He immediately runs a financial risk assessment.
The dynamic between these two brothers is so tense. Peter sees that fixing the pipes will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and even worse, they'd have to shut the resort down for 2 whole years.
Yeah, Peter weaponizes economics against science. He basically says, what is the town going to live on? The tourists will go somewhere else. He demands Thomas completely suppress the findings.
He orders him to write a public statement saying the water is perfectly safe. It's the ultimate collision between objective truth and institutional power.
Thomas refuses, saying it's murder. So Peter threatens him, you'll be fired, boycotted, your family will be ruined.
And this is where Ibsen brings in the media, which is just a scathing indictment. We meet Hofstad, the editor of the local progressive paper, The People's Messenger.
Hofstad is such a phenomenal character because he is the exact 19th century equivalent of a modern, politically driven influencer who runs purely on algorithmic outrage.
Yes, in private, he talks a massive game. He hears about the polluted water, and he is thrilled. He sees it as a weapon to attack the conservative mayor, boost his progressive cred, and champion the little guy.
He promises Stockman the full backing of the press. He's going to blow the lid off the scandal.
But his ideological purity is so fragile. The minute Mayor Peter visits the newspaper office, the narrative flips.
Because Peter doesn't threaten Hofstad. He just uses economics.
Yeah.
He explains that fixing the pipes means a special municipal tax. It'll destroy the local economy, citizens will lose disposable income, and they will cancel their newspaper subscriptions.
And pull local advertising. The pivot is instantaneous. The second Hofstad realizes the truth will hurt his revenue stream, he abandons Stockman completely. He calls it political suicide.
He even agrees to print a fabricated article written by the mayor saying the water is pristine. It perfectly captures how the press, which claims to lead public opinion, is often terrified of it, just slavishly following the mob to protect its bottom line.
It's so cynical, so totally stonewalled by the government and the press. Stockman makes a desperate play. He bypasses the institutions and goes straight to the citizens. He rents a hall for a massive town meeting.
He's still clinging to this naive belief that ordinary working people will choose truth over corrupt elites.
But he totally underestimates institutional power. The mayor and Hofstad don't debate him on the science. They manipulate the structural framework of the debate itself.
Right, they show up early and weaponize parliamentary procedure.
Listening to this scene is almost excruciating. They use rules of order as a gag. They nominate an establishment-friendly chairman. The mayor takes the floor first and gives this highly emotional speech about how Stockman's theories will bankrupt every family in the room.
So by the time Stockman can speak, the chairman forbids him from even discussing the baths. They use decorum to silence dissent.
Realizing he can't talk about the physical pollution, Stockman just snaps. He abandons the issue of the water and attacks the epistemological pollution of society itself.
He delivers this blistering, genuinely dangerous speech. He looks at his neighbors and attacks the bedrock of democracy. He screams, "The majority never has right on its side. Never, I say."
It's a profoundly anti-democratic elitist argument. He says the majority is intellectually lazy, clinging to safe, profitable truths. He claims real truths are only discovered by isolated individuals who are years ahead of the crowd.
He's basically telling a room of struggling people that they're cowards who would rather drink poison than face hardship.
It triggers a total mob mentality. They hold a formal vote, and by a massive margin, they officially declare Dr. Stockman an enemy of the people.
And the excommunication is swift. The next morning, a mob throws rocks through his windows. His landlord evicts him. His daughter is fired from her teaching job.
He loses his position at the baths. Even his father-in-law tries to blackmail him by buying up the resort shares at rock-bottom prices, threatening to wipe out his family's inheritance if he doesn't retract the report.
He is completely isolated, economically ruined, socially radioactive. His wife asks where they will flee, but Ibsen denies us a tragic retreat.
Stockman refuses to leave. He decides to stay in the freezing house with the broken windows and fight a generational war. He's going to educate his own sons and poor street urchins to raise a new breed of free-thinking wolves.
And he gathers his family and delivers that final chilling line, "The strongest man in the world is the man who stands most alone."
It leaves you feeling deeply uneasy, because Stockman is heroic for telling the truth, but his megalomania and contempt for the ordinary citizen are deeply off-putting.
It's complex.
But if you look at the mechanics, you recognize the playbook instantly. Whenever an expert publishes data that threatens an economy, like a climate scientist or a public health official, the exact same levers are pulled. Discredit motives, threaten livelihood, weaponize the media, and manipulate anxiety to turn the truth teller into an outcast. Ibsen diagnosed this with terrifying precision.
And having exposed the boardroom and the town hall, he then turned his scalpel toward an institution that Victorian Europe considered entirely sacred and immune to this kind of scrutiny, the traditional marriage.
Yes, which brings us to A Doll's House. We move from the shattered windows of Stockman's house straight into the suffocating perfection of the Helmer residence. And the Lux Radio Theater adaptation, with Joan Crawford as Nora and Basil Rathbone as Torvald, uses audio to create pure psychological claustrophobia.
The setting project's ultimate security. It's Christmas. Torvald just got appointed manager of the local savings bank, so their financial anxiety is finally over.
But just like Bernick, Nora is hiding a massive secret. Except hers wasn't born out of greed. It was an act of desperate love.
Right. Years earlier, Torvald was deathly ill. Doctors said if he didn't travel south to Italy, he would die. But Torvald had this obsessive hatred of debt. He viewed borrowing money as a moral failing and flatly refused to do it.
So Nora took matters into her own hands. She went to Krogstad, this disgraced lawyer, and secured a massive loan. But because of strict 19th-century coverture laws, women had no financial agency. She needed a male guarantor's signature.
Her father was on his deathbed. Unwilling to burden him, she made a fateful decision and forged his signature on the legal bond.
A severe felony. And for years, she's been secretly working odd jobs, skimming her household allowance, buying cheaper clothes, just to slowly pay it back all, while letting Torvald believe the money came from her father's inheritance.
She is deeply proud of this. She views it as the ultimate proof of her love.
But the past comes back? Krogstad works at the bank Torvald is now managing, and Torvald intends to fire him because he despises his poor reputation.
So Krogstad issues a brutal ultimatum. Save my job, or I expose the forgery and ruin your family.
This forces us to look at the actual dynamics of the Helmer marriage. Basil Rathbone's vocal performance as Torvald is a masterclass in Victorian paternalism. He does not view Nora as an equal.
He views her as property. He calls her his little lark, his squirrel, his doll child. He doles out cash to her like she's a toddler, makes her perform tricks, even forbids her from eating macaroons because they might ruin her teeth.
It's all built on aesthetics and control. He literally dismisses her humanity, saying her desire for money is just a corrupted, inherited trait from her father.
But the critical question is, if you're Nora, yes, you broke the law, but you did it because your husband's foolish pride was going to kill him. When the truth comes out, shouldn't a loving husband drop to his knees in gratitude?
Shouldn't he recognize the massive sacrifice she made?
And that expectation is exactly what Nora calls the miracle. Despite how he treats her, she internalizes this romantic mythology of the Victorian husband as protector. She is convinced that when the letter is opened, Torvald will step in front of her and sacrifice his own honor to shield her from the law.
She is so certain of this that she's secretly planning to drown herself in the freezing river rather than let him ruin his reputation for her. The psychological tension is agonizing, especially leading up to the famous Tarantella dance.
The Tarantella is brilliant symbolically. It's a furious folk dance associated with sweating out the deadly venom of a tarantula bite. On the radio, Crawford translates that physical exhaustion right into her voice. She dances wildly, making mistakes on purpose, doing anything to stop Torvald from opening the mailbox where Krogstad's letter is waiting.
She's literally trying to sweat the poison out of her marriage. But the dance ends. The guests leave. Torvald unlocks the mailbox. And the instant he reads the letter, the illusion of the protective marriage evaporates completely.
It is a scene of pure psychological violence. He doesn't ask why she did it. He doesn't express relief that she saved his life. He instantly and viciously turns on her.
He calls her a hypocrite, a liar, a criminal. His only concern is his social standing. He says, "Now you have wrecked all my happiness."
He immediately plots to maintain the facade. He dictates they will live in the same house for appearances, but she won't be allowed to raise their children because she's morally unfit. He discards her entirely to protect his title at the bank.
The miracle fails to materialize. And then the ultimate whiplash. A second letter arrives from Krogstad. Influenced by Nora's friend, Krogstad has a change of heart and returns the forged bond. The legal threat is totally neutralized.
And the moment Torvald realizes his reputation is safe, his behavior pivots so violently it makes you sick. He burns the bond and shouts, "I'm saved! Nora, I'm saved!"
Notice the pronoun, I am saved, not we.
Exactly. And he transitions instantly back into the magnanimous patriarch, telling her he forgives her, saying she was just a frightened, helpless little creature, but he has broad wings to shield her.
That pivot is the catalyst for Nora's awakening. As he talks down to her, Joan Crawford's voice drops entirely. The frantic squirrel persona vanishes. She gets icy, calm, and terrifyingly rational. She puts on her everyday clothes, sits him down, and delivers the most devastating line in 19th century drama.
Doesn't one thing strike you as strange? We've been married 8 years, and this is the first time we two, you and I, husband and wife, have had a serious conversation.
She dissects her entire existence. She realizes she was a doll child in her father's house, passed directly to Torvald's house to be his doll wife. She existed to perform tricks and make him feel strong.
She realizes she has no idea what her moral compass is, what her beliefs are, or who she is as a human being, because her identity was assembled by men who viewed her as a possession.
Torvald is completely unequipped for this. He tries to use the ultimate social weapon, telling her she's abandoning her most sacred duties to her husband and children.
And her response caused actual riots in theaters. She says she has other duties, just as sacred duties to herself, because she is a reasonable human being before all else.
She makes the impossible, terrifying decision to leave. She walks out, stepping into the freezing night to figure out who she actually is. And the sound of that door slamming shut at the end, it's the door slam heard round the world.
It was the sound of the entire patriarchal social order beginning to fracture.
It's staggering. Ibsen took the fundamental unit of society, the family, and showed that if a marriage is built on economic dependency and preserving appearances over authentic communication, it isn't a sanctuary. It's a doll's house.
And experiencing these massive shifts through the medium of radio is uniquely brilliant. There's something profoundly intimate about having these arguments piped directly into your ears.
The constraints of radio actually amplify the psychological claustrophobia. A 3-hour play is condensed into a tight 60-minute audio experience. No lavish set changes to distract you. You're entirely dependent on the dialogue and the subtle shifts in the actors' voices.
The listener becomes the ultimate voyeur. You're trapped in the room with Bernick as the storm rages, or standing in the town hall as the crowd turns on Stockman. The Foley art, the wind, the gavel, that final echoing slam of Nora's door, it forces your imagination to construct the emotional reality.
And that emotional reality is why Ibsen's legacy is so monolithic. Every major modern playwright is basically working in the shadow of the architecture Ibsen built.
Oh, absolutely. You don't get Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, or Willy Loman's Pursuit of the American Dream destroys his family, without Karsten Bernick first sacrificing his morality for the railway.
You don't get George Bernard Shaw's blistering social critiques, or Eugene O'Neill's devastating family tragedies, or Tennessee Williams's characters clinging to illusions, without Ibsen proving that the darkest secrets are kept in the dining room credenza.
He created the blueprint for every modern prestige television drama that dares to look at the ugly, compromised reality writhing beneath a highly polished surface.
Because he connects all these plays through a unified set of questions. Look at Bernick, Peter Stockman, and Torvald. What unites them? They're all men who use institutional authority to mask their own moral bankruptcy.
Right, they tell themselves comforting lies, convinced that their ruthless pursuit of stability and profit is actually a noble sacrifice for duty.
And on the flip side, look at the truth-tellers, Lona bringing reality, Dr. Stockman refusing to yield on science, Nora demanding authentic communication. Society punishes them severely because they threaten the structural integrity of the profitable lie.
Ibsen demonstrates time and again that institutions will almost always prioritize stability and comfort over justice. Society will violently reject a messy, painful truth because embracing it requires giving up power. It requires admitting fault and tearing up the rotten floorboards.
Which leaves us with a really uncomfortable reflection for our own lives. It's so easy to listen to these audio dramas, look back at these Victorian characters in their corsets, and feel this smug superiority. We laugh at the sewing circle, we judge Torvald, we judge Mayor Peter.
But remove the 19th century costumes and ask yourself, are the mechanics of our society really any different today?
We live in an era where our entire existence is relentlessly curated for public consumption on screens. We optimize our vacation photos, our political opinions, our professional achievements, constantly seeking the approval of our own digital majority.
We construct these flawless, high-resolution digital facades while desperately hiding our actual struggles, our debts, our failing relationships, our moral compromises.
How many of us are still living inside our own carefully constructed modern-day doll's houses? How many times this week have you nodded along with an opinion you didn't hold or kept quiet about a truth you knew just to maintain your professional reputation or keep the peace?
That's the most terrifying question Ibsen asks us all. If the world suddenly bypassed the filter and saw your unvarnished, complicated, messy truth, would you have the courage of Nora Helmer to walk out the door and face the cold reality? Or would you scramble desperately, like Torvald, to piece the illusion back together?
We strongly encourage you to seek out the complete Chesterton Radio collection and listen to these incredible broadcasts for yourself. Let the voices of the past echo in your headphones, and let Ibsen's timeless questions about integrity, courage, and the heavy price of living honestly challenge the way you view your own respectability.
Because that perfectly manicured lawn in the center of town might look beautiful in the sunlight.
But you never truly know what's buried in the soil underneath.